Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the I Will Teach You a Language podcast. Happy New Year. Happy 2018. I hope you've had a fantastic holiday with friends and family and lots of good food. I certainly have. I've been resting, relaxing, decompressing from last year. It was an amazing year last year. I was super pleased to have completed all the projects that I had planned to do. So I'm feeling good, and I'm very, very excited about 2018 this year. No particularly big New Year plans around the I Will Teach You a Language world, although I am re-releasing, I guess, my Spanish beginners course. You might remember from last summer, I released a new Spanish course that's all based around story. So basically, the way that you learn on this course is that you read an entire book in Spanish, which sounds difficult, but actually it's not. You read this book, which I've written, and you listen to it as well. And the way the course works is I then teach you Spanish through the story. So you get to follow along and essentially read an entire book in Spanish by the time you finish the course. It's very, very, very cool, very fun. And we've been getting amazing feedback from the people who are in the beta group. But the beta group is now over. We have updated and improved the course in many, many different ways. And now we're releasing the full version. And for New Year, I've decided to do something quite cool, which is an implementation program. So what that means basically is you join the course, but then you also get a series of phone calls with me over a series of months, so that you've got that extra step of accountability to make sure that you actually keep going and keep studying. So basically, you go through the course as normal, but then once a month, or I think it's probably going to be something like that, once a month, then you check in with me and we talk about how you've been getting on. So that way you are much more likely to actually follow through, complete the course, because you know you're going to have to explain to me why you haven't been doing it if you don't. So now when you listen to this, there's not much time actually, because this has been going out over email. So if that is of interest to you in the slightest, then you should shoot me an email very quickly to olly@iwillteachyoualanguage.com. That's OLLY @iwillteachyoualanguage.com. And if you do that in the next, I think within the next week or so, then we should be able to get you added to that just in time, or at least send you some more information about it. All right then. Great question today about making your own materials. Comes in over email, actually, and it comes from Louise. And Louise says, "Hi Ollie, I have a question for the podcast about producing your own resources. I've been studying Arabic for some time, modern standard Arabic to be precise. My husband speaks Arabic, but I haven't been able to find resources to learn his dialect. And as such, I've stuck with MSA being Modern Standard Arabic. I can use Arabic to text back and forth with his parents. And while I have some basic understanding of the pronunciation differences, my listening is particularly poor. I've recorded my husband speaking and have been listening to this, but I was wondering if you had any advice about the best way to go about doing this kind of thing in a useful way, as I think you've mentioned getting teachers to help with personalized materials before." Fantastic question, Louise. Firstly, Happy New Year. Sorry you had to wait a month to get your reply, but we are properly checking up on email questions now, so at least that's working. Listen, good job with the Arabic. Already being able to text back and forth is fantastic. I don't know whether you use the Franco-Arabic alphabet. That's what I used to use when I was learning Arabic, or whether you actually write in Arabic script. Either way, it's great that you've got to that point because you're already communicating really well. But yeah, this it's just difficult with Arabic because you've got, as you've been studying, Modern Standard Arabic, which is the authentic traditional Arabic, if you like, and yet no one actually speaks that because what you speak at home and with your friends is the Arabic dialect, as you've been finding out. I don't know what dialects your husband speaks. There are many dialects of Arabic. But as you've identified, resources for dialects of Arabic are particularly hard to find. So, I know how that feels because in Cantonese, the language I've been learning for a while, I've got the same issue. Very few good resources. And so for a long time now, and to be honest, even before I started learning these languages without too many resources, I've always been partial to making my own materials, and the basic reason is that, especially when there's not much available, I like to study with things that interest me. Japanese was a funny one because there were all these textbooks which were so dull on topics that every textbook had a whole chapter about the Japanese tea ceremony because, in Japan, they're very methodical and, they have to present all aspects of their culture. And so there comes a point where you're like, oh man, I really don't want to hear about Japanese tea ceremony anymore, let alone read about it and use it to study Japanese. So I would do things like when I was getting the train in Japan, in Tokyo, I would record the train announcements on my phone and I would give it to a native speaker to transcribe and write down what was said. And I still remember those to this day. Those train announcements, I could tell you it word for word. I could at least recognize, I might forget a bit now, but I at least recognize it word for word still. Something else I would do is I'd often do bits and pieces of writing and I'd get my tutor to correct that, so I'd end up with a perfect text at the end. And the advantage of that is that I've then got something that I want to say and it ends up being in good language, right? So that's quite useful. Other things I did was I would sit down with my language partner and I would say, look, I really want to be able to talk about, I don't know, the war in Syria or something, or I don't know, my family life, or I don't know, exploring Mars, whatever interests you. And then just say to my tutor, look, can you just talk about this for a few minutes? Just tell me what you think, and I'm just going to record it. So I'd record that, and then I'd get him or her to write it down, transcribe what she'd said. It might be a bit boring for them, but I ended up with a very, very useful piece of audio and text. Then, in the past, I've often hired people to transcribe film that I want to watch, like something on YouTube or a movie or TV series or something like that. And the guiding principle has always been for me to think, what would I most like to be able to understand? What is my biggest challenge? And for me, usually, like my aim is in language learning is almost always to just be able to chat with people and have conversations. And so the things that I would struggle with most of all would be actually understanding people when they talk about everyday topics. So I would generally aim to produce these little monologues and these pieces of material that were on the kind of topics and the kind of things that I'd have to talk about on a regular basis. So, but it can be anything. The key, though, is always to follow your interests, or at least follow the thing that you need to improve at. So the first step is to ask yourself, where are my weak points? What do I need to improve at? And in your case, you said listening, which is, it's tough with Arabic. It's tough in any language, but particularly in Arabic. And so, in the case of listening then, it's a mistake, I think, to say, all right, I want to be able to understand all Arabic or everything that's ever said, because then you don't get anywhere, right? So you start with specifics and you kind of work through. So you say, okay, what kind of things do we tend to talk about? And maybe you often talk about the weather in Australia. I don't know. So maybe you could ask your husband to just talk about the weather and then record that. Or maybe you can record conversations at dinner. Maybe, if you ever have dinner with him and his parents, record a snippet of the conversation and get somebody to write it down. I mean, often, like, the more kind of extreme and intrusive you are, the better material you get, because it's kind of real stuff, right? And so, recently my big project for last year was conversations, which is, listening material for intermediate learners in different languages that is natural, it's interesting, comes with all the all the stuff that you need to actually study. It's the transcript, translation, all of that stuff. And that was the consequence of all the stuff I'd made before. I always made my own things, like I told you. And so really for conversations, all I wanted to do was say, all right, well, how can I do this on a bigger scale, such that once I've made it, I've then got enough material to study for ages and ages and ages. Because when you've got a big chunk of material like this and you can just dedicate yourself to it, and you don't get distracted, you stick with it, then that's when you can just do a lot of listening all the time, and that's when you really improve. So in your email, Louise, you said at the end, I was wondering if you had any advice about the best way to go about doing this kind of thing in a useful way. And I'm not quite. See, when you said this, I was wondering to myself: did you mean useful in like how do I make good materials for myself, or do you mean useful as in a way that can help other people? Because I've kind of found that the way that I've ended up making the most useful material has actually been to think a little bit beyond my own needs. And so I started doing this the first time I did this was with Cantonese conversations. It's something I did about a year ago, this time last year. I thought to myself, right, well, I want to be able to listen to natural Cantonese between, conversations between native speakers. But I'm sure other people would like this as well. So I basically got a bunch of people together and I just got them to have conversations in Cantonese. I recorded it, and then from that, then I produced transcriptions and translations, and it's been really well received, and it's been very popular among the kind of Cantonese learning community because it's very simple, but it works. It does what it says on the tin. So maybe So again, like I'm not totally sure what you meant by that, whether it's just for you or not. But I think the first step is to say, all right, let's be specific. Let's identify specific things that I can improve in. You can do that by topic. You could ask your teacher to help with that. You could ask your husband if he's amenable. Often with partners, it can be a bit tricky. Or you can find a local tutor or language partner to help you with that. There's lots of people that will do it. You can go on italki, for example. One of the things I've done in the past is buy italki lessons. But then rather than have the lesson, I probably shouldn't say this actually, whatever, that's what I do. Rather than have the lesson, I say, look, could you use this hour to transcribe this thing for me? And usually they're very happy to do it. It means they don't have to talk to me. So there's lots of ways that you can get this kind of stuff done. Usually if you're willing to pay a little bit, it speeds things up. So that's the first thing, the first question. And then the second question then is, if you think this way, Louise, like I do, is to think, well, how could I make this even more useful? So, let's say that you're learning Syrian Arabic, for example. How could I make an amazing resource for Syrian Arabic learners? And then that starts to get you to think a little bit bigger and starts to get grease the cogs and produce the kind of ideas that can be very, very useful. And when you do get involved in this, often that's when you end up learning yourself, right? I found that just by producing Cantonese conversations, for example, I ended up listening to tons of stuff and improved a lot because I was just involved in it. I was working with the language. You know what I mean? So I would definitely encourage you to do that. If you are thinking about doing something beyond your own, like material for your own use, Louise, if you'd like to actually produce some Arabic material more broadly, then shoot me an email. Maybe we can team up on something. Who knows? Anyway, thank you very much for your email. I hope that gave you some ideas there, or at least an insight into the kind of thing that I do. If you'd like to ask me a question, you can send me an email like Louise did, or you can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask and you can leave an audio question there. So at the end of every episode, I like to leave you with a resource of some kind on the topic of the show. And today, I'm going to point you to one of the first articles I ever wrote on my website, actually. And this question from Louise prompted me to go back and look at it, and it's called How to Use Virtual Assistants to Make Your Own Foreign Language Materials. This must have been written 3 or 4 years ago, but it still is relevant. You've probably heard me talk about these ideas since then, and it's funny for me going back and looking at all these old blog posts. I just realized I had no idea how to make a blog post look nice back then. But anyway, the information is still good. So if you'd like to check out that article, then you can find it at the show notes, which will be at iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 236. That's iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 236. And if you'd like to check out the conversations material that I mentioned in the episode today, then you can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/conversations. The material was closed for the last couple of months because I've been working with the people who got involved originally and taking loads and loads of feedback, correcting a few errors, improving the material a bit. But now it's openly available, and you can find that in 6 languages: Spanish, French, German, Italian, Chinese, Japanese, and also in Cantonese, although the Cantonese version is a little bit different. And you can find all of that by going to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/conversations. All right then, thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you back in the next episode of the podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. And here at Story Learning, everything that I do is powered by stories, whether that's writing books, teaching lessons, crafting courses. My mission is to help everyone succeed at learning a new language through the power of story. And we now have comprehensive language courses in over 15 languages, from Spanish to French, Korean to Japanese, and across all levels from beginner to mastery. And you can take a 7-day free trial of any of these programs by visiting storylearning.com/courses. I've poured my heart and soul into creating these courses over the last 10 or so years, and we've helped tens of thousands of new students achieve their dreams of learning a new language, all through the power of story. So go ahead and take a free trial. There's no commitment. You can try out our method for free. See if this can also be the breakthrough for you that it's been for so many other people. storylearning.com/courses.